Thank you, and good afternoon, all of you. Respected speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this exclusive fireside chat with education experts on champion in sports and life, parents' guide to developing student athletes. I have personally been a sports person for all my life, ever since I graduated from, or I left school for that matter, until today, I continue to play a sport, which is tennis. And what I have learned, that there's a whole lot of education that takes place outside the academic field. And when you start a child with sports at a very young age, I think he or she learns a lot of things which I think academic education may not be able to impart. Things like building personality, dealing with people, interpersonal skills, teamwork, ability to deal with failure and success. Recently, I must share with you my personal experience. My grandson, who is about 11 years old, plays football, and he's very, very passionate about football. And he plays very well, I must tell you. At the recent match at our Bombay Gymkhana, his team came second. And it so happened that the prizes, when the prize distribution was done, the team got the first prize. And he was so dejected, he started crying, why can't I get the first prize? Now we had to really cajole him to say, look, in sports and in life, you win and you lose. You cannot be first all the time. And this is an education by itself. So I think sports does a lot of things to individuals and children, which I don't think academic education can do. When we interact with people who are sports people, we find a different kind of a personality, if I were to say, because we know immediately that these guys are into sports. They know how to, the interpersonal skills are very good, because they've learned to work as a team in whatever sports they may be in. So I'm extremely happy that today IMC, through its wing, has organized this event. And I would like to give a very warm welcome to Mr. Kunal Maria, CEO and co-founder of American Academy, Mr. Gavin Rhodes, Head of Football Education and Global Operations, City Football Club, Mr. James Perak, former Olympian and co-founder of Blue Water Elite Sports Training Center, BEST, and Dr. Thomas Vergetz, Head of Academy, Corvus American Academy. Welcome to you all, sir, for this lovely event. Before I conclude, let me brief you a little bit about IMC. IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry is a premier chamber of commerce in the country with a rich legacy spanning well over 100 years of excellent service to trade, industry, and commerce. With a membership base of over 5,000 members and 150 trade associations, we cover almost 400,000 members directly and indirectly. Through its various expert committees, IMC provides policy inputs for government, both central and state, and is continually engaged in interaction with policymakers at various levels. The Chamber is now a cradle for nurturing young talent and promoting emancipation of women through the Young Leaders Forum and Ladies Wing, which have become an embodiment of youth, enterprise, motivation, and positivism. So once again, I welcome you all to this lovely event, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of messages for all the participants. Thank you very much. Over to you, Bharti.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bharti Thakur, and I'm a member of the Knowledge, Skills and Education Committee of the IMC. I'd like to welcome you all to this IMC webinar, and I'm totally amped and thrilled and excited to be here with some of our most forward-thinking sports educators, and I'm delighted to welcome our wonderful attendees to this worldwide webinar. Today, we have an international panel of speakers with panelists from New York, Manchester, Mallorca, and Karjat in India. And I hope you gain many insights from what I'm sure is going to be a lively and enlightening conversation. Today, we will closely examine 3 themes in this panel discussion titled Champion in Sports and Life, a Parent's Guide to Developing Student Athletes. Number 1, how the habits student athletes develop in sport should be integrated into their lives. Number 2, when sports, academics, and life skills are properly integrated, they work as a force multiplier. And number 3, 90% of all sports athletes' careers are over before age 30. So it's their development in other areas that gives them a truly fulfilled life, which is what we're going to also discuss today. So without further ado, let me introduce our moderator for the day, Kunal Maria, co-founder and CEO of Corvus American Academy. A former student athlete himself, Kunal has played basketball professionally at the state, national, and international level. A law graduate with a master's in sports, media, and entertainment law from Georgetown University, Kunal founded Corvus in Karjat in 2020. The school was founded with the objective to create an ecosystem that identifies and nurtures sports talent at the school level. Too many talented students give up their dreams for fear of compromising academics. As a result, the talent pool in India is limited at the highest level. So Corvus was founded with the desire to fill this gap and was built to help student athletes to excel in sports and academics, preparing them to enter the best universities in the world. I'd now like to invite Kunal to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Bharti. Thank you, Mr. Kurakiwala and IMC for having me moderate this fantastic event. Good afternoon to all the attendees. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. The topic for this afternoon is something that's really close to myself, and I'm sure the panelists that we have is going to be really engaging, and it's really exciting to have Mr. Gavin Rhodes, Mr. James Parak, and obviously Dr. Thomas Verghese with us to share their insights. For all of y'all who are enthusiasts in football, and I'm sure Mr. Kurakiwala, your grandson, would love to get the insights of this, based on what Gavin's going to be sharing with us. Let me jump right into it and give you all a quick introduction for each of our panelists. Mr. Gavin Rhodes is the head of football operations within the football education department at Manchester City. Gavin is currently based out of Manchester in the UK. He brings with himself, he's basically in charge of the growth, quality assurance, compliance, and best practices across the club's academy setup. And Gavin has previously, worked across the FA, which is the Football Association in the UK, Nike UK, Manchester United Football Club, and currently with Manchester City. It's a pleasure having you with us, Gavin, this afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome, Kunal.
The next panelists, we speak about Olympians all the time. Well, we have one with us this afternoon, a former Olympian himself, James Parak, as well as, a one-time 50-meter ranked #1 in the world in 1992. James is, has worked across television, broadcasting, as well as, he has co-founded Best Swim Center in Mallorca. James brings with him tremendous experience in developing young athletes. And I think he brings that to the table now with their center in Mallorca. It's a pleasure having you with us today, James. Thank you for taking the time.
You're very welcome. Very happy to be here.
Last but not the least, someone that I've gotten to know really closely over the last 10 months, a true leader in every sense of the word, an amazing human being, and someone that has tremendous experience in both education, administration, as well as the sports setup here in the US, Dr. Thomas Verghese. He brings with him, tremendous administrative and leadership experience, something that we're going to touch upon through the course of this conversation. Dr. Verghese has served as senior leadership positions across world boxing as well as USA boxing. Prior to joining Corvus American Academy as its head, Dr. Verghese served for several years. I think he was one of the longest serving executives in the athletic department of the US Naval Academy. Welcome, Dr. Verghese. It's a pleasure having you with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Since we've just done a quick introduction of the panel, I'm going to jump right into it. Guys, it's a pleasure, as I said. Let's just jump straight into some of the points that we want to cover and share with our attendees this afternoon. The first thing that I would like to throw out there and get your opinion on is this concept about academic and sports, and can they coexist? I think that's the fundamental crux of where we as a nation in India currently are, and that's something that I know a lot of parents deliberate with. So with that, can we just jump right into that? And I'm going to open it up for our panelists to kind of give their thoughts on. Dr. Burgess, can we start off with you with that question, please?
Certainly. I will just say that I wouldn't be here on this panel today if we couldn't put the two together. As a high school athlete, I was 100% an athlete and not a student. But I was fortunate enough to do just enough to get scholarships and be eligible educationally. And then the next thing I knew, I went all the way up through a doctoral degree, got 2 masters along the way. And it was through athletics the whole way that I was able to do all of my schooling. I never paid a penny for any of it. And I either as first a student, then a student coach, and then a student athlete, then a student coach, and then later on a coach administrator that brought me through all those years. And I owe everything I have to the fact that I was able to do both academics and athletics throughout a 50-year career.
Great. James, it would be great to get your thoughts on that as well.
I think that we all will agree that if you just do your sport, you're going to increase the chances that you burn out very quickly. You need other stimulations, you need other social interactions, and you need other networks to be able to plug into rather than just your sport network. Beyond this, sport and academics have to go hand in hand because of the things that we want to produce as the end product of your sporting career. You said most of the people are done by the age of 30. I would think most of the people in my sport, swimming, are done by the age of 13, let alone 30. So one of the things that we as a sport do very badly is this pathway and helping kids to understand the longer term athletic development is hand in hand with the longer term academic development. And when the two work very well, then you have people who are very highly performing, not just in their sport, but in the life that they're going to have after their sport, which I'll come on to later. But the swimmers perform very well in academics. Why? Because they have to learn time management skills. They have to learn that swimming is a time-intensive sport. And if you want to do your academics and you want to move forward in your life, you have to be very good at time management skills. You need the academics, you need the other stimulations, the mental stimulations, you need other people around you in your support networks. And we at the Best Center will not have any athletes here unless they are combining academic education with their sporting ambitions.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to put it. Gavin, your thoughts, being involved with the football education setup at Manchester City. I know there's a lot that you all do as a club to promote the harmony between academics and sport and football training as well. So it would be great to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, similar to what James mentioned from a swimming perspective. I mean, player development has to work in tandem with both how we're developing players within their on-field football development, as well as their off-field development as people, as individuals, as they continue their journey of development with us as young players and young people. So yes, we 100% focus on them their development as players, but the development of people and education and the development of softer skills is a huge part in how we're developing our players. That interaction and how they interact as individuals, how they interact and develop as people through the working in a team setting, working together and working towards achieving common goals is crucially important to a player's development as a football player, but also as a person. So education and football have to work hand in hand.
Perfect. Gavin, I'm going to stick with you because I know we have a lot of football enthusiasts, and India is a market where football seems to be a firm #2 sport currently, just after cricket. I mean, we all have to give up the cricket because we're in India. But just kind of sticking with you, you know, one of the fascinating thoughts, and when we watch television, when we see these athletes kind of, you know, perform at the way they do in football, especially with the way Man City is doing currently, you know, you having been working closely with a lot of them at the academy side of things, I think that the thing that fascinates me personally, and I think would be interesting for the audience as well today, would be to understand, you know, what really differentiates these young footballers to kind of make it to the highest level. And how you as a club kind of, you know, help them, kind of groom them, nurture them, and what are the key factors that you see in these young athletes as they blossom into these fantastic footballers?
Good question. I think within the development of any sort of player or players, we look at particular performance factors which we are looking to develop them across. And you know, it's pretty common across most sports, whether, you know, their technical capability, tactical capability, and their physicality will, you know, the development physically will vary as they progress through the different growth spurts that they have on their journey. So all of those are always gradually sort of honed in on, developed from when they join our academy or junior academy, you know, from 7 years old straight through to being a 16-year-old and then joining our, you know, elite development squad from between 18 and 23. We're always sort of looking at those areas from performance factors. I would say the key differential that really determines which players then form the basis of our first team squad or go on to make a profession within the game generally will surround the psychological side of the game and the development of them mentally as players. And we created something internally that we called City Tough. It was a particular initiative that we integrated right across our academy, where we were educating players and working with players right through the ages on how they sort of performed, and that did they have the head, the heart, and the stomach for the game. And you know, you have a lot of players that were very, very comparable technically and tactically, but the key differentiator was that psychological piece, and the ones that wanted it that little bit more, that had that desire and had that attitude and had that application to achieve. And the City Tough internal training program that we do right throughout our academy helps to try to sort of, you know, help the players prepare at the different age groups, and sort of, you know, some are a little bit more obviously outgoing than others, but just to sort of be patient and give people the opportunity to sort of, have they got these skills? Do they come later in the day? Do we need to hold some of these players back, not just physically, because they're smaller than, say, you know, an 11-year-old? You know, a good example for us probably at the moment, like Phil Foden. Phil now forms the basis of our squad. He was very, very slight, you know, around that 10, 11, 12 years old. Even so much so when the first team, the manager had him playing within our first team squad. He held him back for a while because he wanted him to sort of still, you could see technically, tactically, but psychologically, he was very, very much stood out across most of the players. But it was just being patient with regards to how we managed his overall development as a player and as an individual. But to summarise, for me, and what I see a lot within our academy, the psychological side of things is the key differentiator in that sharp end of talent development.
I think that's a fantastic way to put it. Thank you for that, because I think mental toughness, psychological, as well as perseverance are three things that I took away from what you just said, and we'll get into that a little bit more. James, just shifting gears and coming to you as someone who kind of competed at the highest level yourself. Let's kind of take it back. In the early days. Since we have a lot of parents here, just wanted to understand, what would your advice be? First of all, did you have a young mentor when you were growing up? Did you have someone mentor you? How did you as a young athlete, balance academic and sport? And what role how important a role did the mentor / your parents play in terms of helping you reach that ultimate, goal, which was the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games?
There's a lot in that. It's a great question. It's a difficult one to answer. So I'll sort of guide you quickly through the summary parts of this for my life. My pathway was different from many other people's pathway. And like Gavin said, everyone's got their own pathway, and you have to, as a parent or a coach or an educator, understand that people will move at different speeds at different times in their life. I had a relatively normal upbringing in sport and life and education and friends and so on. I didn't become good at my sport until I was 21 years old. That's when I made the national team for the first time and made the Olympics. So I was still fresh when I was in my 20s and was going to be at my peak years in my athletic performance. Too many people are going to go through this and not have the success that they want aged 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever it is, and then say this sport is not for me. You have to learn how to lose, and you have to learn how to develop technically and tactically and everythingly. So my sporting life was very normal, and the role my parents played in this was to stay away from my sporting life. They had the ability to be able to say, look, it's your sporting life. This is your thing. It isn't our thing. These are not our ambitions. You've chosen this. We will take you to the sport. We will pay for whatever you need to pay for. We will be there as parents, not as people who are going to be your coaches. We're not going to give you any advice. What I wanted from a parent between the age of 11 and 18 was them to stay the hell out of my way. Just be somewhere else. I don't want to talk to you. I certainly don't want your input in my swimming, because A, you don't know anything about it, and B, it's nothing to do with you. When I then was 18 and I moved off to university, and again, my educational component was critical in my ending up in the right place when I was 18. Because when I was 18, I had to be in Leeds, where the #1 swimmer in my event in the world was training. So I had two role models at that point. One was the coach and one was another athlete. And it was easier for me then to have my senior professional swimming career when my parents were back home and I had moved up to Leeds. They didn't know anything about my swimming development, really. And that's the way it should be. So for me, I could then concentrate on my athletic development, continue my studies, and not be interrupted by my parents. Having said that, parents are essential in most people's development. It's a team, the coaches, the athletes, the team of athletes that you're with, and your family and parents. And the parents need to understand that. If I could just give you 6 very quick parental advisory points. You're a parent, you want the best for your kid. You want them, you love them, you want them to be happy, you want them to be engaged, and you want them to be passionate about something. But your job is then not to live your passions through that kid. It's their life. You've done yours and you've had whatever you've had. Now it's theirs. Admire them, support them, be a fan of them, but it isn't your career. It isn't your athletic career. If you take them to their competitions, the most difficult time with any athlete-parent relationship is the car journey on the way home. Your role as a parent is never, ever speak about what just happened on the field of play unless they bring it up. Do something else, or just letting them be quiet, whatever it is. And when they bring it up, either in the car journey on the way home or some other time in their week, never criticize their performance or make any comment about their performance or tell them what they did right or wrong. You only tell them you only ask them what they think they could have improved. Or if they were the coach talking to them, what would the coach be saying to them? This is a much better entry into that difficult conversation that you're going to have with your children throughout their athletic career. As a parent, always remember to be on time. If you're taking your kids to training or competitions, make sure they're on time. And one final thing is, grandparents are really, really fantastic in the healthy development of young athletes, because the grandparents say the golden 6 words, which are, I love watching you play. That's it. No more, no less, no expectations, no criticism, no nothing. I just love watching you play. And the kids are much happier. They generally will perform better in a more healthy, longer term development when there is no expectation, no criticism, no input. As a parent, just a grandparent enjoying watching their grandchild perform and play. And if you remember those, you're halfway there. And I was very lucky that I had parents who pretty much followed that pattern. And my recommendation is stay away, be the support network, and then let the coaches do the coaching and enjoy watching their athletic development, and be the taxi driver and the bank and everything else that you're inevitably going to be as a parent. And it's difficult. It's the most difficult thing, parenting. But if you are able to step back and be that support network, then they've got a chance.
I think that's really insightful and really great feedback to the parents here to take away. And I'm sure, James, that's something that y'all are integrating in the facility in Mallorca as well, where a lot of young athletes are coming in. And as you said, the burnout in swim, because it's so performance and time-based, is so high that these are, I mean, just the fact that you kind of realized your true potential at the age of 21, just kind of makes everyone here, just back a student, right? That's what you're saying. Just back your child to the best extent possible. Give them the support that's required, but let them kind of get there their own way. There's no right or wrong way. Am I right in saying
There's
that?
no right or wrong way. But remember, my better years came after I was 21 through 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Now, fortunately, the average age of swimmers at the highest level is going up because we're much better at the idea of the long-term athletic development of the young person, which involves academics. It involves delayed rewards. You can't just swim and have success immediately. You have to practice it. The skills take an awfully long time to come. So be patient.
Yeah, and I think that kind of is a really interesting thing that you brought up, because you mentioned pathway a couple of times through this conversation. Gav kind of touched upon it a little bit. Dr. Verghese, I'm going to come to you with just a couple of things for you to kind of shed light on. The pathway for an athlete is really important, which includes what they do at an early age in terms of developing a structure around their day, to finding the right curriculum, to then, kind of, let's take your example where you went as an athlete to a fantastic university, which then helped you develop all aspects, including your leadership skills, to then kind of take into the real world. So just talk us through, that journey, as well as the importance the curriculum plays, as an academician now, as well as someone who works in with the program. Talk us through that piece as well, because a lot of parents here need to understand, the importance of finding the right fit for their child.
Well, I will say first off that I couldn't agree more with James, exactly what he said there across the board. I was one of those people who was fortunate enough, I call it fortunate enough now as opposed to being unfortunate, but coming up, I had parents who were completely disassociated from my sport and my academics. I was able to run the streets all night long, things of this nature. As a result of that, I learned one thing. I learned to be highly competitive in everything I did. And the beauty of that was that I was able to be competitive without fearing competition. If you ask me a mistake I made as a parent with my children who all became elite athletes, but it was exactly what James said there. And that is that thinking that I knew so much about the sport, as a parent, I was the person who had that conversation in the car with them. And years later, my children will tell me the one thing they wish I had done differently was to not put that pressure on them of having the teaching moments after the competition. And all that did was reinforce fear in being a competitor. So James, you're 100% right there. And then now as a grandparent, I get to be the person who just enjoys my grandchildren competing also. But to me, it is about the ascendancy. It's about the fact that every child matures just mentally, physically, and emotionally at a different level, at a different age. And what we have to always remember is just because a child is a champion at age 12 at a very high level doesn't mean that they're mentally and emotionally a champion at that age. And there is a development process that must take place. And if you rush it, I guarantee you somewhere down the road, they're going to hit a peak mentally, emotionally, or physically, and they're not going to have had the proper development sequence, and you're going to have to go back and recapitulate in order to move forward. And what is so important is that when your child shows great motor skills, especially in sports that require kicking or throwing, extremity sports, I call them, there's a great tendency that unless they're taught in a proper sequence and learn to do the skills to a level of proficiency first before they move on, something I think Manchester City does a tremendous job of, what's going to happen is that they're not going to have the core development. So as they get further along their sport, they may have great hand-eye motor skills, but what they don't have is power, explosiveness, because they haven't learned how to generate it through the proper development sequence of muscle fiber firing. So, you know, what we have to always be constantly aware of in the development of kids is taking them from where they are and putting the training in the proper sequence. In order to do that, you have to make sure that they are properly aligned with coaches who know that. Parents, you have to be patient. You have to realize that as your child develops, sometimes they're not going to be the same age champion at age that they were at age 10 or 12 at 14. But if you rush it, yes, they'll be the greatest champion in the world at 14. And then at 16, they're not ranked in the top 100 because they haven't developed sequentially. However, if they develop sequentially, there may be a time where they have to mature physically, mature mentally, mature emotionally. And like James was talking about, it took him to age 21. Actually, I was a better athlete at age 26, 27 than I was any other time in my life. It took me that much longer. But the thing is that you cannot rush the maturation process. And anyone who tries to do that, usually they'll get away with it in the early years, and then they will peak, and that's when it's problematic. And that's why surrounding yourself with the proper training programs and things of this nature is so important, because most coaches are trying to make a name for themselves. And when they're trying to make a name for themselves, they're going to take that 12-year-old and they're going to try and only improve upon that child's strengths at the expense of having not developed their full game, their full potential. And what you have to make sure that you're doing is you're linking your child with the resources and the proper individuals who are there to develop the child as a complete whole unit, as opposed to just their win-loss record.
I think that's really interesting, because again, all of y'all have kind of brought up program, curriculum a couple of times. I'm going to kind of jump into that a little bit further. Coming back to you, Gav, with a discussion around, at Man City, y'all have developed this football education program, which has got the structure, the framework, which has now kind of gone global, in the sense that, you guys are in India, you guys are there in Australia, Indonesia as well, which is y'all are taking the same philosophy, the same principles that are kind of been taught at the academy in Manchester and now transcending borders through your coaches, to kind of build on a framework and a curriculum. Can you talk us a little bit more on that? And then after that, James and Dr. Burgess, I'm going to come to you to talk about the importance of an academy setup, because the word academy, from my understanding, in India needs to be explained a little bit further, which includes all aspects, as you mentioned, of your holistic athlete development, which is academics, as well as sport training, nutrition, and all those elements, versus just only sports training in a bubble. So Gav, let's start off with you, and then we'll kind of, build it out from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just off the back of what both James and Tom spoke around there, the importance of curriculum content and taking our methodology and coaching principles, philosophy globally. Everything that we within our program, within Corvus American Academy, it's all what we do here in Manchester. I think one of the biggest challenges we've sort of noticed really, and some of the parental feedback as well, is that there's this sort of like expectation that, and we've had some feedback of this nature, is why are we not playing more and more 11-a-side games, and why it's this perception that the children should play straight away in an 11-a-side environment. And unfortunately, it's what James and Thomas said, that level of patience that needs to be applied, that forms a part of this education journey for the players, is crucially important. And the curriculum content that we have has a progressive journey and a nature that caters for both individual players but collective needs of players, which sometimes gets overlooked. And you have to cater for the individual player. Players develop at different rates, just like what Thomas and James have mentioned in their own sort of experiences. But what we try to do within the program as well is the coach really is he's guiding this sort of journey. He's not telling, he's trying to sort of guide the players individually and collectively to explore the game themselves, experience the game themselves, and then make decisions themselves within the games. So it's not telling them, it's guiding them to try to get that information from individual players, because invariably the children do have the answers. They do have them. They know the difference between when they're doing well and when they're not doing so well. But they sometimes don't have the confidence or don't feel comfortable to do that. But that's the art and the skill of the coach, is making sure that the program that is being delivered does cater for the levels and the individuals or the collective needs of players. And it is built into small-sided building blocks. So we will do a lot of like 1v1, 2v2, 3v3 games, all within a full-size pitch area. But the children are put in those environments so they know when they enter a bigger area of pitch that they're playing in, they understand what to do both in and out of possession of the ball. They have practiced this. It's been built up in small sort of pitches through our game model that ultimately evolves and gets bigger as you become progressively more confident and comfortable and more proficient in given areas to then express themselves. They've got that level of confidence and they know what is expected of them and they know what to do. But it's a very, very patient process, and one that the curriculum, the content that we have is consistently delivered globally. We have to have it that way. And you will have some players that are further on in their journey than others, but it's just trying to sort of bring that back in to say, look, we have to build up your own bank of information and knowledge to make sure that you can perform at a higher level one day. But if you miss that gap and then just put them into an 11-side setting at 14, 15, and they've not had any progressive educational journey on the way, how can you expect them to perform in an 11-side setting when they've not had any building blocks to prepare them for 11-side?
And I think that's a really interesting piece because, you know, that kind of is the mindset that I grew up with as an athlete, that the more you do something, the better you get at something. But now having kind of seen it, how it's done at universities in the US, you know, across, you know, professional setups like yourselves, James and Gavin, I think this whole concept of more equals better isn't really true. It's about doing it the right way and kind of building in, you know, the other aspects into your daily life, and being consistent is more important. So James and Doc, maybe you all can just quickly talk about, you know, that aspect of things in terms of knowing what's right instead of just continuously doing more of the same thing every day.
Yeah, we don't, in the swimming world and with us now, people are going down from just doing huge volumes of things and being much more specific in the development of each individual. We can't coach an entire program now with everyone doing the same thing if everyone's at a different rate. So like Gavin says, you know, you have to be able to coach the individual and the collective in what is a relatively limited space. So we follow all the same things that they do at City or that Thomas has talked about in the boxing world. When we look at the numbers of people that come through the sport or come through our program, you know, like Gavin knows, there's so few of them are going to get to the very top. And he picked out Phil Foden. And one of the things I'll just say now is if you ever want a good example of what Gavin's Man City program is talking about when they're talking about personal resilience and competitive drive and the psychology of it, was watching Man City play Atletico last week. It was an amazing masterclass in mind, the strength of mind. So when kids come up short, or when they know they're not going to be the Olympic champions or make the Olympic team, and most of them won't. The one thing we always drill into our kids and our parents is to have them understand that it is not what you win in your sport. It's about who you become because of your sport. And there's so many things that we learn that are so important in being successful individuals, being successful family members, parents, friends, workers, work colleagues, leaders. We learn all of these things, and you learn them when you lose, and you learn them when you win, and you learn them as part of a team. And so it's not really about whether you win the Olympic gold medal. It's about the person you become because of the process that you go through. And that is the most important thing that we want to instill in everybody.
I think that's really that actually embodies everything that I think is important to the holistic development. Let's quickly touch upon a couple of other things. We briefly at the very beginning spoke about, this whole concept of character development that happens with sport. It's not just, not every athlete becomes a professional athlete. I think I'm not a professional athlete anymore. Went to pursue law. James, of course, you were a professional athlete, but then now have in broadcasting, you kind of have your own business. Gav, you're an executive at one of the largest clubs in the world. Doc's obviously heading a program in India now. So talk to us about the leadership skills that sport kind of helps you build. And, one of the other things that I keep telling a lot of the youngsters, especially in India, is the importance of learning how to fail is something that only sports teaches you how to kind of build that into you and then kind of fight back, which unfortunately, a lot of times, a lot of the young children today don't know how to deal with failure because their whole life's, structured around success. Gav, James, whoever wants to go with it first.
Well, I'll come in with something that I think is important to understand. When I said it's important to win and important to lose, Gavin and Thomas have both said, usually the kids that win age 11, 12, 13 are just the bigger kids. And they maybe have not got the skill set. And the problem with that is when they start losing and the other kids grow and their physical and emotional development grows, then they've got no way of understanding how to deal with defeat. It's important that you do have that. And again, that builds into this longer term athletic development. You're never going to be the best in the world if you're 13, 14, 15. It's going to take a long time. In fact, those kids are rubbish. They always say, oh, I'm the best in the country or I'm the best at whatever when you're 11 or 12, 13. Well, who cares? Actually, you're not a very good swimmer if you're swimming 20, 30 seconds slower than Michael Phelps when you're a kid. You're rubbish. Yeah, you're good against the other 11-year-olds, but that doesn't mean anything to us. So it is important to do all of these things slowly, and each piece has a reason for being where it is.
Perfect. Doc, kind of coming to you with, I know you I think dropped off for a bit, just kind of taking what James was saying and kind of passing it on to you to kind of take it forward. We just were discussing even the leadership aspect of how sports helps develop that character in you, and the characteristic development traits that sports brings about. Most importantly, dealing with failure, perseverance, and I know you're a big advocate of the three pillars: academic, sports, and leadership. So the floor is yours. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, what I have always seen over the years with all the athletes that I have worked with, there are two transitions that take place. One of the first transitions is you have to teach your kid to have the tenacity, the discipline, the time management, the structure in their life in order to be able to get them to train harder and more and things of this nature and more consistently. And then as they start to transition and develop these characteristics, the characteristics of discipline, of structure in their life, of time management, what you see is a transition to where a coach's job becomes from trying to motivate a kid to work harder to suddenly he has to start getting the athlete to work smarter and less, because they develop these skill sets where they learn to push themselves, to have drive, to have this competitive nature, to be able to outwork everyone. And you have to dial them back and teach them that it takes just as much discipline to know when not to do too much as it does to know when to do more. And the beauty of a great athlete is when they reach that point where the coach doesn't have to motivate them to work harder. He has to motivate them to work smarter. And when he can get to that point, everything starts coming together because now they're starting to put the mental, the physical, the holistic aspect into their training. But that comes with maturity. Now, how do we get there? Well, what I've always seen is that when I have a person who is developing in their character, developing in their academics, and developing in their athletics, each one helps the other, because it is not, you know, most kids, it's not that they're not smart enough or they're not talented enough. What it is that they haven't developed the habits that are necessary to be great. And if you eliminate any one of those, then the child doesn't develop fully. And at some point, one of those areas is going to come back and hurt them. Either they're not going to be a student of their game because they don't have the academic discipline to learn if it's in their sport, which is the same discipline they need to learn academically in college and school. They're not going to have the same drive to do whatever they have to do in the sport, which is the same drive that they have to demonstrate in their academics. And where do these come from? It comes from the development of the character of the individual. And if we're not developing character along the way, and we're not giving them confidence, which comes with leadership and all of these, then what happens is it's like, you know, it's like a three-legged stool. If one of those legs is not there, then the stool is not stable and it's going to fall over.
Perfect.
So you have to develop all three.
Perfect. So we have a couple more minutes before we have to wrap up. So I'm just going to kind of get your last thoughts on a couple of things. We've spoken about curriculum, program, structure. From what I understand, that's really important for parents in India to kind of take away and understand what's the right fit for your child in terms of, you know, there's a progression even from a child moving from coach A to coach B to coach C, because that's required for their holistic development. Very rarely do you have one coach coaching a child from 11-year-old all the way till they turn pro. You know, you require to have that, you know, progression. So parents, keep that in mind as you all are kind of going through this journey. Gavin, James, Dr. Thomas, any closing suggestions, inputs for parents here in India in terms of what are the key takeaways? I know James mentioned, you know, the 6 points at the very beginning. Anything that Gavin, Dr. Burgess, you all would like to leave parents with today?
I think from myself, really, just to sort of bring together a lot of what has been mentioned, is we talk a lot, certainly ourselves, around just making sure that wherever we are placing players or children, make sure we're placing them in the right environments. Got to create the right environment for kids to learn and to develop. And that's a key starting point for us in any journey that we start for any of our players, is making sure that we've created that right learning, that positive learning environment for players and children so they can flourish and they can develop as young people and young players. And the other thing, I think it's important that they, along this journey, it's not to expect a smooth journey. I think every journey has bumps in the road. Every journey should experience disappointment along the way. And if you don't experience that disappointment, it's very, you're then not in a situation to develop resilience to then grow and develop as individuals. But I think if you don't make it as a professional athlete, I think that as long as you've been in that right environment, and as long as you've got a passion and a love and a desire to want to be involved in a particular industry, there's nothing to stop you, really. Because as James mentioned earlier, there's a very, very small percentage of athletes that get to the top of their field, very, very small. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a career and you can't have a successful career in a particular area or industry that you have a lot of love and passion for.
And that's exactly, you know, what I wanted to kind of leave parents with is you might not become a professional athlete, but you can use sports and academics as a tool to get into some of the best universities out there and then build a career from there. And that's really a very
I wasn't quite good enough to play professionally, but I consider myself to be a professional in sport.
Exactly. Dr. Burgess, any closing thoughts from your end before I go on?
What I would say is that, you know, there was a great exercise physiologist back during the times when the East Germans were so good in sport now, and someone came up to him and they said, how do you become a great Olympic champion? And they were expecting him to give them all the physiology, and he turned around and he said, pick your parents very carefully. There is and I think he was talking, you know, that genetics has a lot to do with it. But I think from a sport management aspect of this also, I think we have to look at it, not just the physical development of the children, but we also have to look at it from the mental development. You heard James talk today a whole lot about, you know, parents stay out of the sport part. But I will say there's another piece to that, and that parents do want to have a role in all of this. Well, the role needs to be in the character development part, because if you are playing a role, not just because of the sport, which is easy to say, well, you got to be more disciplined, you got to manage your time for your sport. No, you have to be more disciplined, manage your time for life, for every aspect of your life. So as we develop the character of the children, we give them the tools so that then the coach can take and develop the child in that proper sequence to give them the greatest opportunity to be the best they can be. And if genetically they don't have it, it doesn't matter, because they have it for the academic development, for the life skills development, for all the other things that are important. And this is one of the things that marrying the resources to the child. And that is, if the child is in an environment where they can be nurtured in holistically in all three areas, they're going to have the greatest opportunity to excel in academics and in athletics and in life. And that's what this is all about.
Perfect. So Bharti, we want to pass it back to you. There were one or two questions. I'm not sure if you're going to kind of take them for the panelists, or how you want to kind of deal with this, because there were two questions that I saw that popped up.
Maybe we can take one, because it's we have 2 minutes, and then we can. So why don't you go ahead and take one question?
Okay, so I think you know, the one of the questions, I think it was for Gavin. It was for you. About, you know, the EPL being the top football ecosystem to grow the sport in England. What initiatives have they taken, or even the teams individually, to develop grassroots participation in the country? And that kind of, you know, goes to the philosophy that you as each club has set up within the UK, and now with Man City, as you've transcended going overseas with it. So maybe you want to just touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, back to probably the curriculum, really, methodology and the philosophy. What we have is an identity as a football club, and what we do at first team level then transcends down into consistency within our academy. What we do is take all of the key elements of that particular program and then transfer it into our program that we have with Corvus American Academy, as well as all of the other partnerships that we have globally. So we dilute that content to make sure that it does cater for mixed ability players or recreational players. So the program that we have and the play model that we've created looks at all of the fundamentals that go into the development of players. And we've just broke it down to make sure that the children in India are experiencing exactly the same as what children do in Manchester or anywhere else in the world. And that's how we've sort of like modified and developed our overall coaching curriculum to make sure that it does cater for children globally and they get an insight and experience into what we do here at Manchester City.
Perfect. Bharti, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to say thank you to all our speakers and obviously to our attendees. It's a privilege, to have you here with us, and thank you for this very interesting and insightful panel discussion. We are especially grateful to our speakers for sharing their domain expertise and for attempting to unravel the complexities of this issue. So on behalf of the IMC and the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, my sincere thanks to Mr. Kunal Maria, who's the founder and CEO of Corvus American Academy, Gavin Rhodes, the head of the football education and global operations of Manchester City Football Club, Mr. James Parakh, who's the co-founder of Blue Water Elite Sports Training, and Dr. Thomas Vergetz, the head of academy at Corvus American Academy. Thank you very much for your time and words of wisdom. And our sincere thanks to all the attendees for joining us today. Your presence is a source of encouragement to IMC, and I'd like to thank the IMC team for all your support. So thank you again for contributing to the success of this event, and we will close it out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bharti.